You were this close. This close, Canon. So Canon revealed the EOS R, their first 4K full-frame mirrorless camera, proving once again that there is just no such thing as the perfect camera, especially in this 2K price point. As a videographer, I was expecting certain features and I was left disappointed, to be honest. And this is not going to be an I hate Canon video because the EOS R is still a nice camera, has some sweet image quality, but it's just not the camera for me. And I'll get into that as I mention the specs for this new camera. So this is a 30.3 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor camera using the new Canon RF mount. It has a fully rotatable screen, awesome, and about time we got a full frame mirrorless camera with one of those. 10-bit 422 via the HDMI output. Great news for anyone dealing with a lot of color grading, but you will have to invest in an external recorder like the Atmos Ninja 5. Also 12 stops dynamic range with the Canon log, so this should be better dynamic range than the Canon 6D Mark II, Canon's full frame DSLR camera that is around the $1,600 price point. If I recall correctly, I believe even the 80D, the APS-C size sensor camera, had better dynamic range than the 6D Mark II, but in any case, I believe the EOS R should have better dynamic range than that. Compared to the Sony a7 III, it's still lagging behind the competition when it comes to dynamic range. For up to 30 minutes, you can shoot UHD at 30 frames per second with 480 megabits for the bitrate, and these are MP4 files with a H.264 codec. But recording at UHD, there is a 1.6 or 1.7 times crop factor. I've seen conflicting reports on this, so I'm not sure which one it is. You can also record 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, and you can also record 120 frames per second, but at 720p. And this is the first big issue that I have with this camera. When I talked about the Canon M50 earlier this year and mentioned I didn't believe it was a product deserving of all the hate it was initially getting online, I mentioned I still wouldn't buy the camera because I thought the specs were fairly similar to my Samsung NX500, and I wanted a camera with 120 frames per second at 1080p. My camera does 120 frames per second at 720p, and the image looks soft and is prone to moire. I could deal with the 1.6 or 1.7 times crop factor because that's basically an APS-C size sensor crop factor. That's like shooting with the Canon 80D. I have no problem mixing different resolution footage, and you have to do that anyways with other cameras like the a7 III or the GH5 if you want to have that nice 120 frames per second slow-mo. It's going to be at 1080p and you're going to mix it with your 4K footage anyways. But I was so annoyed when I saw that this full frame mirrorless camera is limited to 720p resolution for 120 frames per second. I mean, the granddaddy of 4K mirrorless cameras, the Panasonic GH4 that brought 4K to the masses, had 96 frames per second at 1080p. Granted, the footage looks a little soft compared to the camera footage that we're getting in newer cameras now, but that was released in May 2014. Come on, Canon. Now, I wasn't hard on the Canon M50 being stuck with 120 frames per second at 720p at the $700 price point that it was being sold at. That's under 1K, but at this price point, and that's the next issue, $2,299 is the price. That's $300 more than the Sony a7 III, that you're not limited to a crop factor in 4K, and you also have 120 frames per second at 1080p. The Sony also has 2 SD card slots, which I thought was dumb already with the Nikon Z6 and Z7 cameras, but it's just crazy on the $2,300 Canon EOS R. My camera cost less than $1,000 when I first bought it, and it only has 1 SD card slot. I have experienced footage corruption, not complete SD card failure, but I've had to deal with that, and hey, you get what you pay for. But when I'm paying over $2,000, I expect to have that backup, that footage backup. I expect to have that 2-card redundancy at that price point. What's also pricey are the native RF lenses. You get the EOS R with the 24 to 105mm f4 lens and you're paying $3,399 US. That's way above my budget that I'm willing to pay for an upgrade for my current camera. Now, for anyone who already owns Canon glass, you can buy an adapter to use the lenses that you currently own with the Canon EOS R. Well, except for owners of the Canon EFM glass, because for whatever reason, those APS-C size mirrorless lenses are not supported with the RF mount adapter, which I think is silly. Anyways, there are 3 adapters to choose from. Just a regular adapter that costs $100 US, one adapter with a control ring that you can use to control the aperture ISO exposure, which I think is cool. And just as cool, there's another adapter that allows you to use either a drop-in ND filter that costs $400 US or a polarizing filter that costs $300 US. While the adapter with the filters is cool, especially for lenses where you can't put filters on, it still puts the price point of the EOS R $700 more than the Sony a7 III and the Nikon Z6, and with the regular adapter $400 more than the competition. Now, I don't own any Canon glass, so whether I choose to go with native RF lenses or if I choose to buy the EF adapter and buy an EF lens, I'm still gonna pay over $500 US. So basically I have to decide if the great autofocus that you get with dual pixel autofocus, the awesome flip screen, and the Canon color science, if it's worth 1,000 Belize dollars, because $500 US is 1,000 Belize dollars. But speaking of the Canon color science, like I said before, this camera is still nice. If for some reason you're watching this video and you haven't seen Devin Supertramp's video where he shows off what the Canon EOS R can do, link to his video and the behind the scenes video are in the description. The footage looks great. You can see how massive that 28 to 70mm f2 native EF lens is. You will also notice they filmed with external recorders, so you know this was filmed at 10-bit 422. So basically the image quality is maxed out. Overall, my thoughts are the Sony a7 III has better features, but I really want flip screen and Sony doesn't have that. So at this point, I'm thinking of maybe giving up great autofocus and going on board with a Panasonic GH5 to get 4K at 60 frames per second, to get 1080p at 120 frames per second, to get 10-bit internal recording. I'd also be giving up great low light performance. So before I bite that $1,700 US bullet, I am still looking forward to, as I've mentioned in a previous video, Photokina later this month to see what else is coming out. There are also 2 Panasonic rumors I've read, one saying a full frame Panasonic camera is on the way, and another rumor talking about a Panasonic G90, which is a less than $2,000 camera with the GH5S sensor. On Sony's side, there's rumors of an A7000, so I'm definitely looking forward to what's coming out, and we'll find out September 25th. So anyways guys, what are your thoughts on the Canon EOS R? Are you still interested in getting the camera despite some of the video limitations? Is the flip screen with Canon's great color science and dual pixel autofocus at 4K, granted with a slight crop factor, is that enough of a sale for you to spend $2,300 on this camera? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already for more tech, cinematography, and gaming content to come. And I'll see you guys next week.